Let us start today's session. Welcome to Programming with Python session 6. Before we start with this session, I'm going to explain a couple of things on string data type in Python, which would be helpful in subsequent programs. All right. So string in Python is a data type. Let us look at a couple of examples to understand what kind of operations we can perform on strings. Have a look at statement 1. Greet is equal to hello. Here the data type of greet would be class string. And you just print the variable greet. You can see an output of hello printed on the output screen. Alright. Now in statement 3, you have another print statement which prints greet times 2. Greet is a string variable, keep that in mind. Okay. So there are two operands that I have used here. One is greet, the other operand is 2. The operator is star. Correct? So when such multiplication operator is used on string variable, the string will be simply repeated or replicated. Hence, the output that you observe is hello, hello twice. That means the string hello will be repeated for 2 times, constructing a single string hello, hello. The next statement, 2 times string, 2 star greet. Greet is a string variable. This also produces the same output where the string greet will be appended to itself 2 times, resulting in a single string called hello, hello. Look at example output statement 5, where greet is a string variable multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3. In this case, the two integers or whatever the number of integers that you mentioned in your expression would be evaluated first. That means here 2 times 3 will be evaluated, which is 6. Finally, the statement would be evaluated as greet times 6, which would be hello for 6 times. Okay. Let us look at another example now. Another statement, which is assignment statement, n equal to 2. In this case, the data type of n would be integer. 2 being an integer constant. If you store an integer constant in a variable, that variable becomes class int type variable. Now you print n times 4, n being an integer, 4 being an integer. Here the multiplication is between two integers, which would result into 2 times 4, which is 8. This is the key difference between using multiplication operator on string versus an integer variable. Okay. What if I have to repeat the string 2 multiple times? Then what you need to do is you need to typecast the integer 2 into a string type by the statement n equal to str of 2. Here 2 is in fact an integer type, and you are converting that integer type into string type. So now the data type of n on line number 8 would become class string. Now you can apply repetition operator on a string. N times 4 results into 2, 2, 2, 2. All right, because here n is a string and that string is repeated for 4 times. Hence you get 2 repeated for 4 times, which is another string. The last output statement that you can see here is n times 2 times 3. As I said, integer expression would be evaluated. 2 times 3 is 6. N times 6, n is a string 2, so 2 will be repeated 6 times. So this would be your output. Okay. So these are the things that you need to understand and learn how a string repetition or string replication works in Python. The operator that we use for this is a star, and we use some integer value along with the string variable name, or a string constant can also be used. All right, now I'm going to show you this practically how this works. All right, so let us say n is hello. You just print n, it will just print hello, right? And if you print n times 3, you can see a big string formed by repeating the string hello for 3 times. All right. Similarly, 3 times n would also give you hello, right? So in the string repetition, whether you use integer as a first operand or second operand doesn't matter. So if you want to repeat hello for 10 times, where hello is a string stored in n, you can use this 10 times of n. No loop used here. You need to mention the number of times you need to repeat that same string. All right. Now I say n is 5, and if I ask for n into 2, this would give you 10, but it's not 5 repeated twice, 55, right? Why is this? Because in this case, you have stored an integer variable, and you have multiplied by the integer with another integer, which would be an multiplication operation between two integers. Hence, 5 times 2 is 10. If you want to store 5 as a string in n, then you have to use typecast, explicit typecast. Now you can ask for this. So when you have 5 stored in n, and if you multiply this n twice, then you will be getting a string whose length is 2 and 5 repeated twice. And you can do this for 10 times or any number of times, where you can see that 5 repeating for multiple times. All right. So this is how you can understand the repetition or replication of string. Okay. All right. Let us take another example. You have something like, hey, how are you? M is a string variable which holds a string within it, right? So hi slash n, this is slash n is called a new line character. And then you have a word called how, again new line character, or then again a new line character, and then you word question mark. Now I'm going to print m. You see how it produces output. Every new line character in the output, first of all, you don't see slash n at all, but you will see the effect of slash n in the output. How? Every slash n character moves the cursor to the next line. So when you print the variable value m, the first word hi is printed. After that, it encounters a slash and a new line character. So immediately the control moves to the next line. How is another word, it prints. Next, another new line character has come. So it moves to the next line. Cursor moves to the next line. After that, it encounters the word ARE. It prints ARE. Again, it moves to the new line. And then it prints YOU question mark. And that there ends the string and there ends the output as well. So keep it in mind that whenever you see a string with some special characters like new line character, like slash n, when you print the string, it doesn't print those new line characters as it is, but it will convert those new line characters into an effective way of producing the output by moving the cursor to the next line wherever it is required. All right. The next thing that you have to understand is, say you have a variable called first name, and you also have another variable called last name. Okay, you have two string variables, first name and last name, and you can use plus operator on string variables. And as you see here, plus operator is a concatenation operator where you can club two strings together. All right. So first name holds ram. That is where you can see this ram is the first part. And in the last name, another string variable, you have Kishan. So you can see Kishan appended to ram. All right. This is how you can concatenate or club multiple strings together. Okay. Now name is another string variable in this case. Right. So these are the couple of things that you need to keep in mind before we move ahead with our today's session. Let's move on to the session now. So the primary focus in today's session is print patterns. So let us look at the first print pattern that we are going to produce. Assuming that your input is 3 and the expected output is something like this. Okay. Assuming that the input is 5, the expected output is this. Assuming that the user input is 10, the expected output is this. Whenever you have to work on print patterns, the very first thing that you need to focus upon is the input and output. You need to have thorough understanding on the relation between input and output. All right. Once you know the relation between the input and output produced, you should be able to write the code easily. Okay. So how do we achieve this? What are your observations out of these three examples you have seen just now? When the input was 3, you could see 3 repeated for 3 times. That means you have to print 3 threes on the output. When the input was 5, you need to print 5 for 5 times. When the input is 10, you need to print 10 for 10 times. That means user can pass any number to you or digit, and you need to repeat that same input for that many number of times. That is a ask. All right. So the very first thing that we need to do now is to read the user input first. Okay. Let us take this example and let us try to develop some code that produces this output. So when the input is 3, this is expected output. All right. The first step for us to take care is to read the input. So to read the input, you have input function in Python, and you can also add a prompt to that input function as a string in the argument form. So you ask the end user to pass the value of n as input, and the input provided by the user will be read and stored in the variable n. And any input that you pass in Python by default will be treated as a string. So now after you execute this statement, if you look for the type of n, it would be a string. Assume that user entered 3 as input. However, that 3 will be stored as a string in n. Look at this simple statement. You read the input, and as I said, n will be treated as a string because input function by default returns a string as its response. And that same input, I'm assuming that always the n value will be a digit or a number. I'm using string multiplication or string repetition here. I'm converting that same n into integer and I'm repeating that string that many number of times. Is this not enough to produce this kind of output? Yes, it is. So you can achieve this with just simple two statements. Two simple statements are enough to produce this output. And in some interviews, the interviewer may not allow you to use string repetition to achieve such print patterns. In that case, what to do? So I'm showing you the second version of this same program and how you can achieve this without using string repetition functionality of Python. In this second example, I read the user input and I convert it into an integer and then I store it in n. So now the data type of n would be integer. User enters 3 and that 3 will be stored as integer in n and the type of n would be integer. You can use a for loop or a while loop. Here I have used for loop for convenience. For some variable, I have considered a variable name as ii in range n. Okay, for ii in range n, I am just going to print n value every time, and I am using the end value, which is argument to print as empty string. Meaning, first of all, this for loop, when you use range and you have used only stop value or the end value as argument to range, so it automatically starts with 0, the starting value. That means ii would be 0 one time, ii would be incrementing to 1, next 2, next 3, right? And range value, when you are using n, the n value is exclusive, right? So in total, this loop executes for 3 times. For I value 0, for I value 1, and for I value 2, assuming that n value is 3. So this loop executes 3 times. Every time this loop executes, you are just printing the value of n. N is a string and you are printing that string 3 as it is. So this print statement executes 3 times, every time printing 3. And by default in Python, once you print something, the cursor will be moved to the next line. To control that, you are using your own value assigned to end, the argument of print. Hence, the cursor won't move to the next line to produce the next output on the fresh line, but it will remain on the same output line. All right. So using these three statements, you can produce the same output. These are two different ways of printing this pattern. All right. The second version I have explained here is because the interviewers may not allow you to use string repetition because it is quite simple and there is no any loop used over there explicitly. Hence, you should also understand a different way of solving the same print pattern using range function and any loop, either loop, for loop or while loop. Anything you can use, and for loop will be generally used for convenience. All right, let us practice this. So I am going to do this file so that I can execute it and show you. So I'll just take some example, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to print a pattern. The first thing for us to do is to read the user input using string repetition. You can say n. If you just print n, it will be printing that user given input as a string, correct? So, or you can also test it by printing the type of n. So let me run this after saving. I pass 3 as input and the type of that input is string. Hence, what I asked you to do is use this string as it is, because you need to repeat this same input for how many times? The times should be integer type. So you convert that same user input into integer. All right, that is what we have done. You take this user given string, which is a numeric value, however, stored in the form of string, and how many times I need to repeat it. For that, you need to mention the integer type. So you can run it now, and you can pass 3 as input, and you can see 3 repeated for 3 times. This is a pattern that we are looking for. You run this for second input, maybe 5, you see 5 repeated for 5 times. Correct? You run this for 10 input, you can see 10 repeated for 10 times. All right. So a simple two statements can produce the pattern in this case. And the second thing that we talked about is, what if the interviewer doesn't allow you to use any string repetition? In such cases, you read the user input and treat the user input as integer. So I'm typecasting the user input into integer. I store it in n, and then I use a for loop, and I use a range, right? And I print n value. Also, I don't allow the cursor to go to the next line, right? Now, input is 3. You see, it's the same output, but the way you dealt with your program is different. You have used for loop here. Pass in 5, you can see 5 repeated for 5 times. Same input of 10, you can see 10 repeated for 10 times. So these are the two different ways of achieving this print pattern. All right. This is one approach. This is a second approach. Clear? So if you go with second approach, you can comment out the first approach, and you can test your second approach, or vice versa. It's up to you now. Okay. Or in the format, you can use uncomment and comment operations, so that now only this code would be active and you can test your approach too. All right, this is how you can produce the expected format. Let us move on to the next pattern. In this case, when the input is 3, look at the output expected. It is again 3 repeated for 3 times, but each output has to be on its own line of output. If the input is 5, that 5 has to be repeated 5 times, but that 5 has to be printed on multiple lines, right? If the input is 10, 10 has to be repeated, but it has to be printed on fresh lines. That is the only difference. Can you guess how to achieve this? Can you guess the code for this? Again, I'll show you two different approaches. If you are allowed to use string repetition, how you can do this. Okay. Look at this carefully. PS here, n is a user input taken as a string. N is 3, for example, as a string. PS is a print string. That is how I treat the variable name as. Okay. So user given input, here string concatenation has come into picture. String concatenation. I have already covered what string concatenation is. It means club two or more strings together, right? So user given input is just 3. Since you need to produce output on different lines, you are adding a new line character to the user given input. So 3 and then slash n is your string at this point of time. And you're repeating this for n number of times. It is a string repetition. But you have to convert n into integer. So you have converted n into integer, and finally you can print the value stored in PS. But keep this in mind. What is a special operation on strings? This special operation on strings, colon minus 1, indicates that exclude the last character. Keep it in mind that in Python slash n is not two characters. Slash n is treated as just one character. Any special character, slash n, new line character, slash t, tab character, these are all single characters only in Python. So if you exclude the single last character, what you will get? I'll show you this practically, and finally you are printing the value of PS. So using these 4 statements, you can achieve the output expected in the given format. Or the second approach, if your interviewer doesn't allow you to use string related operations, you can use a for loop with range, and you can just print any value. By default, print once it completes its job, it moves to the next line. So automatically every 3 that is printed over here will be printed on the fresh line. And this for loop on line number 2 executes 3 times. II value 0, II value 1, II value 2. Makes sense. So this is how we can achieve this. Let us go to practice. So first I'll go with approach 1. Okay, feed the user input. Then you concatenate a new line character to this. So you need to have one more bracket. 3 plus n, 3, n would be a single string, and repeated that for n times. And let me print it directly and show you what happens. Print, sorry, you just store this in somewhere we call PS, print string, print the PS, and this. One extra brace is what I have used. I have removed that. Input is 3. Yes, it's not liquid. Sorry, again I have this big quite over here. Unsupported operand type, integer and string. Line number 3. Let's go back and check line number 3. Line number 3 is this. Sorry. Treat the user input as a string because string concatenation is allowed only on strings. So instead of converting the user given input into integer, you treat it as a string only. Append another string to that, a new line character, so that this becomes a single string. Repeat that for n number of times. What you see here is that this extra new line character, right? Why is this happening? Because you need to understand this step by step. So first, let us print And let me comment out this code. So if you run this now for an input of 3, observe the what is that you have appended to 3? A new line character, right? So that new line character won't be visible in the output, but its effect can be observed. So that new line character is just a single line of space that you have seen, right? So that is output of this piece. And if you repeat this for n number of times, you can see that same value 333 repeated with new line character as well. Correct? However, finally, say for example, you give 3 as input. So it becomes 3 slash n. And if you repeat this for 3 times, you will finally get 3 slash n, 3 slash n, 3 slash n. And this is what will be stored in PS, and this is what you are printing. So it first prints 3, next moves to the next line, prints 3, moves to the next line, prints 3, and then it goes to the next line, and then program execution terminates. This is where you see that extra one new line seen in the output here. If you want to avoid that, and always keep that in mind, if your input is 5, what happens? What would be the pattern generated here? Loop will execute 5 times. No. So this is what you get. But always remember that extra character that you see only at the end of the string is not useful. That is what you need to exclude. To exclude the last character in any string, you can use some special operation. You can, of course, use something like this -1. Okay, keep this syntax in mind when we talk about strings, you will understand all these formats. However, now you print PS so that you won't see that extra space. You see, 3 times 5 this time. 5 repeated for 5 times. Okay. There is no extra new line character being printed. To take care of that, you have excluded the last gap. This is how you should understand this. The second approach now. What if the interviewer doesn't allow you to use string related operations? In this case, read the input as integer, use the range function, just print n value, and the default value of end is new line character, and that is what we want. So we are good with this code. Run this 3. You can see that output produced as expected. 5. 5 repeated 5 times, but each 5 printed on its own line. 10 printed for 10 times, each of it printed on its own line, which makes sense, right? So this is how you can achieve this print pattern. Let us move on to the next print pattern. When the input is 3, the expected output is this. When the input is 5, the expected output is this. And when the input is 10, this is expected output. The key in developing any print pattern programs is to first understand the relation and the pattern between the input and output, right? So the input is 10. What you see here is always the input, always the output starts with 1, right? Irrespective of the input. When the input is 3, the output is 1, 2, 3. When the input is 5, The output is expected is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So input can be any integer value, but the output starts from 1. And where does it end? It ends with user input only. If user input is 3, it stops at 3. If user input is 5, it stops at 5. If user input is 10, it stops at 10. So these are your observations. And of course, this is good observation and you can start the code, right? So if you want to really understand the program, you read the user input. First, I will show you how to generate this using string manipulation. Then I will not use string manipulation, I'll also show you. Take a print string, which is an empty string to begin with, right? Then you use a for loop, and that for loop starts from 1, right? The range starts from 1 instead of 0. By default, range is the start value of range would be 0, but you are explicitly starting with 1. The reason being, the very first output to be produced is 1. So it would be more convenient for me to start from 1. All right. Next, what is the last output to be produced? That's nothing but the user input as integer. So if you treat n as an integer, of course, you need to convert this n as integer. Here is a typo in the first line. Okay, then n plus 1 would be your end range, because end range is always exclusive, and always print ii value, and instead of printing every time, you are appending it to the ps print string, and you are converting that integer ii into a string. Okay, finally you print ps. All right, so these are the 5 statements that you can use to produce this kind of output. Read the user input as integer, right? This is a typo, as I said. Read user input as integer, start from 1 and go up to that user input plus 1, because user input is inclusive in the output. Hence, in the range, you have to use n plus 1 as a end value. Every time, the current value of ii ranges from 1 to 3, right? The value of ii would be 1, 2, and 3 for a given input of 3. All right. So every time, convert the integer value of ii into string and append it to ps, which is a print string. And finally, print the string only once, the print string. That's all. If you are not allowed to use any string functions, the other way is to read the user input, convert it into an integer, and use the same for loop as you see on the top, and just print the value of ii. And make sure the end value is an empty string. Whether you can use the above 5 lines of statements if you are allowed to use string related operations. Otherwise, you can use these 3 lines of code to produce this pattern. Let us practice. If I have to go with approach 1, read the user input as integer. Print string has to be derived every time, so assign null to that. Start a for loop. For ii in range, your starting value should be 1, and you have to go up to n. Since n value is exclusive, end value is exclusive, what to use this. And here you can just append the value of ii, but ii is an integer. So you convert this into a string first and then append it to an existing print string and print the value of ps just once. I'm commenting out the second approach code for now, and I'm going to run this. And if the user given input is 3, you can see 1, 2, 3 as an output produced. Input is 5, you should see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as output. Well, this is using first approach. Now I'm going to use a second approach. Read the user input, start from 1, go up to n plus 1. Every time you print, but what? Don't print n, print ii, which is a varying value, which holds the varying value 1, 2, 3, right? Like that. So every time I changes, the new value will be printed. That's why in the output you can see every time the output changing, right? If you pass in 3, sorry, I have used new line character. I need to control that by using end equals to empty string. All right. Input is 3. You can see 1, 2, 3 produced. Input is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 produced. Input is 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 produced. Input is 25. You can see all the numbers produced up to 25 starting from 1. Correct? So this is how you can use second approach to produce the pattern. All right. Let's move on to the next pattern. The next pattern is if the input is 3, the output is just same. However, you should observe a space between each output produced on the same line. If the input is 5, you need to produce the numbers 1 to 5 with one space in between. If the input is 10, you need to produce all the numbers 1 to 10, but while you are printing them, you need to observe one space in between. Right? Very similar to the last program. The only thing is you need to take care of those spaces in between. So in the first step, you treat user input as integer and treat it. Then start with a print string, which is empty string, and again use a for loop with range. Since you need to start with 1 irrespective of the input, range has to start with 1 with the start value, and you need to go up to n inclusive, so you should use n plus 1 as the end value to the range. And every time you can append the ii value, convert into string, and then also append one space in between. Sorry, not in between, at the end. So 1 space, 2 space, 3 space would be your final print string, where you have to get rid of the last extra space, for which you can eliminate the last character in your string and print the rest of it. So for that you can use this print ps of colon minus 1. Using these 5 statements, you can generate this print pattern. If you are not allowed to use string related functions like concatenation and all, this is a second approach. Read the input as in integer, use the same range function every time you print ii value, and make sure your end has been assigned to a single string. Makes sense. So 1 will be printed, then space, 2 will be printed, then space, 3 will be printed, then space. Finally, you come out of the loop, and then there ends the story. Let us practice this. Quite simple. All that you need to do is to introduce space. Read the user input. Start with empty string. Yes, you are already assigning this current value of ii. In addition to that, you also add one extra space. But get rid of that extra space and print only the rest of it using this and this. User input is 3, and you can see 1, 2, 3 printed with space in between. Input is 5. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 printed. Input is 20. You can see all the numbers generated and printed with one space in between up to 20. All right. This is how you can produce this. If you want to go with second approach, this would be your second approach. Read the input, print II value, and make sure you end the line with single space. So input is 3. 1, 2, 3. Input is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Input is 10. All the numbers up to 10. All right. This is a pattern. Let's move on to the next pattern. The next pattern is, if the input is 3, the output produced is 1, 2, 3, but each of it to be printed on a fresh line. I'm not going to spend much time on this because you should get an idea by now. If the input is 5, you have to produce the numbers from 1 to 5 and each of it printed on its own line. If the input is 10, you have to produce the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each of it printed on its own line. So quite simple again. If you are supposed to use string concatenation and you want to use print only once, you can do that. To begin with, you start a print string with empty string, and again you need to start from 1. So go start from 1 and go up to n plus 1, because n plus 1 meaning n plus 1 is exclusive. That's why in the range you have to use n plus 1. And instead of space at the end, you append new line character. That's the only key. And finally, when you are printing, you just avoid the last character in the constructed string, which is extra new line character, and rest of all you print it. Using these 5 statements, you can achieve this. The second approach, if your interviewer doesn't allow you to use string related operations, is to read the user input as integer, use the same range function, and print the value of I as it is. By default, end will be assigned with new line character, and that's what we want in this example. So this will automatically work. Clear? If you have to practice this, all that you need to do is to get rid of this in the second approach. And I'll just quickly run this for an input of 5 and show you. Sorry, some mistake I did. Is it an indentation? No. What was the invalidatory for base 5? N is integer. Start from 1 and go up to n plus 1. Print the value of a. What's wrong with it? Maybe the input I have given was wrong. Yeah, see this extra character I have given. That was a mistake. But there was no any problem with the input. All right, in the code. So all right, yeah. So if you have to run this same program with 10, this is how it works. All right, let's move on to the next print pattern. The next print pattern is, if the input is 3, the output to be produced is to start with 3 and go down to 1. If the input is 5, the output should start with 5 but should go down to 1 and stop over there. If the input is 10, the output has to start with 10 and go down to 1 and stop over there. All right. Observe the key differences between each and every program that we are discussing over here. Eventually, we will be getting to a stage where you will be writing code to produce triangles, diamonds, and all that. All right. Hence, every point here that we discuss is equally important because you need to first understand where to start, where to end, and what is a step. Right. All right. So, read the input as integer. Start with an empty print string. Use range function. Look at this range function, how we have constructed. When input is 3, you need to start your output with 3. Hence, your range start value is n, and n is already an integer, right? Because you are typecasted in line number 1. Where to stop? The stop value is 0 because 0 is exclusive. And look at the step value, which is -1, meaning every time you decrement. Start with 3, and every time you decrement. So 3, 2, 1, and you cannot exceed 0, right? So the moment you reach 0, you stop over there because 0 end value is exclusive. So every time you convert the I value into string and then also append a space between because you clearly see the space between each and every output that you produced. Finally, you print everything that you have constructed into print string except the last character. So this is the syntax that we have been using. Using these 5 lines of code, you can produce this output pattern. The second approach, if your interviewer again doesn't allow you to use any string related operations, you can do it on the fly. You keep generating the numbers starting from n up down to 1. Every time you decrement n value, sorry, not n value, I value, and print the value of I. And make sure that you remain on the same line, but you add an extra space in between. So you have to use end equal to single space. Using these 3 lines of code also, you can generate this output. Let us practice this. If you want to go with approach 2 directly, start with n. This is a starting point. Ending point is 1, but you have to use 0 because it is exclusive. And every time this is a decrement trend. You have to decrement the value, right? So you have to use -1. It is decrementing the trend, and every time the decrement is by 1. So you should use -1 over here. Let us run this. The input is 3, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, I guess you have to produce output on the same line. So you have to add and equals to single space. Run this one more time. And you can see the output produced as expected. This is a decrement trend, decreasing trend. And you use 5, you can see all the numbers generated down to 1 starting with the user given input. Input is 20. You can see all the numbers produced starting from 20 down to 1 with one space printed in between. Nice. This is using approach 2. If you want to use approach 1 for the same, read n value, start with the empty string, and you if it's the same range function you have to use, no? So n is the starting value, ending value is 1, hence you have to use n value with 0. Step is -1 because it is a decrementing trend. And you keep generating the print string by adding current value of ii as a string and then single space. Finally print everything except the last space. So this is how you are going to achieve this. So for this again, input is 3, so expected output can be achieved. Input is 8, for example. Yes. All right, let's move on to the next pattern. The next pattern is if the input is 3, the expected output is to print the output starting from 3 itself down to 1, but everything should be on the next line. I'm not going to spend much time on this again. If the input is 5, this is what the output is. If the input is 10, you need to produce all the numbers down to 1 starting from 10, but each output has to be on its own line. Quite simple. All that you need to do is to manipulate with the end, right? So if you are allowed to use the string manipulations and all, string concatenation and all, this is what you need to do. And finally print PS except the last new line character, single character. Using these 5 lines you can achieve this, or else you can use again the same for range loop, but you can print the value of II every time as it is, and make sure end is always new line character only by default anyways, so it will continue to move on to the new line. All right, using these 3 lines of code also you can achieve this. Well, let's move on to the next pattern. If the input is 6, the output expected is 0 to 486. If the input is 7, the output expected is 0 to 46. How is this output different than the previous input 6? There is no any difference in the output. However, the similarities are the output always starts with 0 and the step is 2. The next number to be printed is 2 numbers apart. Once you print 2, the next number to be printed is 2 numbers apart again. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. But the user given input is 7. So you have already exceeded user input. So you stop over there. Whereas when the input is 6, you have to also print 6. Right? Similarly, if the input is 10, the output produced is this. Start with 0. And every time you produce the numbers, of course, these are all nothing but even numbers, right? As we call. All of these are divisible by 2 evenly, meaning leaving the remainder as 0. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 finally. All right. So I hope you got an idea by now. Observe one single space between each output, and everything, all the output is maintained on the same line. So you need to maintain end value properly with single space. Let's move on to the coding. Read the user given input as integer. Start with empty string. Range is very important now. Start value, end value, and also the step. Start with 0 always. N plus 1 is important because if the input is 6, you cannot exceed 6. If the input is 7, 7 plus 1 is 8. However, the step is 2, which is very important for us now. So how do you construct the output string? Output string is concatenated with the current value of II as a string and then single space. Finally, you print string by ignoring the last character in it, last single space character in it. This is a 5-step program to generate this output. Again, the second approach without using any string operations. Same range function. You just print the value of II. Make sure you maintain end with single space. Using these 3 lines also you can achieve this. All right. So the interviewer may ask you to use print only once. In that case, you have to go with first approach. If you are allowed to use print any number of times in a loop like this, you can go with second approach. And let us explicitly observe the key difference here. If the input is a 6, how does this work? Say, I'll explain you the second approach. If the input is 6, user reads the input 6 as integer and it is stored in n. II starts with 0. So one value of II would be 0. Next it would be 2. Why? Because the step value is 2 in the range function here. So 0, then 2, then 4, then 6, right? What happens when I reach 6? When II value becomes a 6. Look at the range function. N is 6, n plus 1 is 7. So 6 is within the range of 7. So it goes ahead and also prints a 6. Well, after printing 6, II becomes 8. And 8 is not within the range of 7. You have exceeded user given input. So you stop over there. But how does the same thing work to produce the same output as 0, 2, 4, and 6 if the input is a 7? When the input is 7, n would be 7, II would start again with 0, and the numbers it produces is 0, which is printed. Then it becomes 2, which will also be printed. Then it becomes 4, 4 will also be printed. Then it becomes a 6. And look at the end value of range. It would be, since n is 7, 7 plus 1 is 8, right? 6 and 8. Yes, 6 is still within the range of 8. So it goes ahead, and 6 is less than 8. So it goes ahead and prints a 6. Then I value becomes 8. N plus 1 is also 8. 8 less than 8 is false. So it doesn't print 8. And there ends the story. So that the same code can work for both input 6 as well as 7 seamlessly and produce the output that we are expecting over here. Very clear? So all that you need to focus upon is what is the start value, what is the end value, and what is the step. Also, is it a decrementing trend or incrementing trend? Once you know all these, automatically you should be in a position to write the range function. Once you know how to write the range function with all the three values, start value, end value, and step value, identify what is that I need to grab every time in each iteration to produce the output as described in the output screen. And using that, you can keep generating the numbers. And in the first approach, if you want, you can keep building the print string and finally print it only once by probably eliminating unnecessary characters. Generally, the last character only would be the unnecessary extra character. In the second approach, every time you change the value of II in the loop, you just print the value of II or whatever based on the given program and make sure your end value is maintained properly. That's all. Let's move on to the next print pattern. If the input is 6, the expected output is 0 to 6, and each of the output has to be on its own line. If the input is 7, again the output is same. If the input is 10, the output expected is 0 to 10. I'm sure based on the past experience, you can achieve this easily. And if you want to look at the code, this is the code for you. Assuming interviewer allows you to use string related operations. Your range function, look at it carefully. Range function starts with 0, goes up to user input plus 1, so that user input is included in the output, and step value is 2. Every time you keep constructing the print string and make sure you append new line character to the end of the print string, and finally you exclude the last new line character and print rest of it starting from 0 to meaning all the string except the last new line character. So using these 5 statements you can achieve this. If you want to use the same without using string operations, of course, yes, you can do that. Every time you have to print the value of II and make sure II value is stepped up by 2 every time. And since the output has to be produced on each fresh line, automatically end value with new line will be automatically helping you out. So you need to manipulate the value of end value over here. Using these 3 statements, you can produce the same output. Well, let's move on to the next print pattern. Input is 5 and the expected output is this. All right. Input is 6 and the expected output is this. Input is 10 and the expected output is this. What is the similarity that you have observed from the last three sample cases? The output always starts from 1 and step is 2. It is incrementing trend and the user given input is not included in the output. Well, these are the observations. This itself gives you the clue how to write the range function. Again, start reading the user input into n as integer. Start with empty string. If you look at the output always starts from 1, so range has to start from 1. And user, you have to reach user input, but you should not exclude, sorry, you should exclude user input, right? Sorry, it depends again. If the user input is odd, it has to be included in the output. If the user input is even, it should not be included. That will be automatically taken care. Let us see how. And step is 2, it is a positive, it increasing trend. And space is something that you need to add explicitly, and you have to print everything except the last single space. So using these 5 statements, you can achieve this. How? Let us dry run this. Say input is 5. Your range function starts from 1 and then it goes to 3. II value goes to 3 because 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. And look at the end value of range function. 5 plus 1 is 6. That means you have to go ahead and still print 5. So that is how 5 is included in your output. What if the user given input is a 6? After printing 5, the value of II becomes 7. 7 and n plus 1 is 6. 7 and 6 are compared. You have already exceeded the limit of user given input, so it won't be printed. That means 7 won't be printed. All right. Again, if the interviewer doesn't allow you to use string related operations, then you can use the same range function but print the value of II and make sure end is properly configured to use single space. Using these 3 lines of code, you can achieve this. All right, let's move on to the next print pattern. If the input is 5, the expected output is 1, 3, and 5. But remember, each output has to be produced on its own fresh line. That's the only difference. But rest of all is very similar to the last program, right? So you know how to achieve this. All that you need to do is you need to make sure you assign new line character to your print string instead of space. That's all. Rest of all is same. So you print the print string except the last new line character appended, and that is how it works. So using these 5 lines of code, you can achieve this. If you are not allowed to use any string related operations by the interviewer, then the second approach is here for you. You start from 1, go up to n plus 1, which is exclusive. Step value is 2, which is incremental trend, and print the value of II. Using these 3 lines of code also, you can achieve this. Well, let's move on to the next pattern. Input is 6, and this is something interesting. When the input is 6, the first output to be produced is 6. The next output is 2 less than the current value, which is 2 less than 6 is 4. Again, go further down. This is a decreasing trend, remember. 4 becomes 2, 2 becomes 0, and once you reach 0, stop over there. Interestingly, if the input is 7, still you have to start with 6, which is interesting, right? If the input is 7, You need to start with 6. So user input can be even or odd, right? When the user input is even, no problem. You will start with the user given input. But when the user input is odd number like 7, you need to adjust your start value to 6, which is just 1 less than 7, right? All right. And remember, you need to stop at 0 always. If the user input is 10, which is again even number, well, you can start from 10 and go down to 0 by generating each even number in between. Well, all right. Interestingly, I want to show you one capability in Python before we go to this code, which is another interesting feature in Python, multiple assignments and using single statement. Say I have two variables, I want to store two different values in them, and you can probably print the value of them 10 and 20, right? Instead of using two different variables, two different statements, you can use something like this 10 comma 20. What happens now? If I print both x value and y value, you can see 10 and 20 coming out over there. How does this work? It is just nothing but the ordering. X and y are the variables on the left hand side of assignment operator. The first variable is x, and the first value on the right hand side of the assignment operator is 10. So 10 is the value that is assigned to x. The second value is 20, and 20 is what assigned to y. And when you print the values of x and y, you can see 10 and 20 coming over there. And this won't limit to just two variables. You can use as many variables as you wish. Say in the first variable I want to store integer, in the second variable I want to store a float, and in the third variable I want to store a string, and in the fourth variable I want to store some boolean value. And we can go ahead and print all these four variables. See, very well assigned, right? So this is another nice feature within Python where you can use single statement to assign multiple values to multiple different variables. And I am going to use this feature of Python in the code that I'm going to show you. So without looking at the code, if you just look at the output, right? If the input is 6, you need to start from 6 and go down to 0. Can you tell me what I should do here? Say I use second approach for, or the first approach only, okay? You read the input and you start from where? You start from n, which is 6. Okay, for now, it is okay. But you need to also include 0 in your output. So you have to use your end value with -1. And the step is -2 really, because every time you start with 4, next in output to be produced is sorry, you start with 6 and the next output to be produced is 4, 2 lesser. So the step is -2, so that it indicates that it is decreasing trend. And every time you just append space and keep constructing the print string by excluding the last space, print everything over there. Well, on this works well for 6, right? 6420, well and good. If you run the same program with 7, an odd input, add number input, it produces a different output, but the expectation is for 7 also to produce 6420. How do you achieve this output even in the case of input being 7? Well, all that you need to do is to adjust your starting value, right? So you can just check the condition. What is that? If n is, sorry about that, an odd value, just subtract 1 from it. First of all, false in place. Run it now. 7. See, if the input is 7, you go with 6420. And if it is even number, meaning 6, for example, you get the same output. Well, other way of dealing with this statement is you can write single statement. How is that? Instead of using if, you can say n equals to n, means don't change the value of n. When if n mod 2 is even, right? Else n else. See what I did here? This is another way of writing the statement, right? In Python. The value of n, you read the user input. Well, good. What you are saying in this statement is assign n to itself. Means if n is 6, put 6, don't change anything. When only if n mod 2 equal to 0, that means when the user input is even, don't change the value. If the user input is not even, that means it's odd, then assign n minus 1 to n. Meaning you are degrading the value of n by 1. So if the user input is 7, n becomes 6. If the user input is 9, n becomes 8. If user input is 101, n becomes 100. Well, this is one extra statement that you need to deal with, after which rest of all will fall in place. This is other way of dealing with adjusting the user given input. 7. Yes, well, this is expected value. And input is 6, which is even already, so no worries, you can see that output produced. All good. Let's move on to the code, and this is a line that you see on the screen where I have used two different things. One is multi-variable assignment in a single line where n comma ps means n is a variable, ps is another variable. I have assigned two different values to two different variables. The second thing that I have used is how to decide n value. Leave n value as it is if it is even, otherwise reduce it by 1 so that it becomes nearest even, smallest even, close to it, and then assign it to it. Okay, with that n value will be updated accordingly, and ps value, which is print string value, will be always starting with empty string, so that empty string will be second value will be assigned to second variable ps. Range, same range will work for us, and print string plus convert the ii value to string and then use single space. Finally print ps by excluding extra single space. Well, if you want to directly use the code which doesn't use string manipulations, this is where it is. Using these 4 lines of code also you can achieve it. There is no ps print string here, but you are directly calling print function multiple times using the iterative structure for. Excellent. Let's move on to the next print pattern. If the input is 6, this is output starting with 6 but ending with 0. If the input is 7, it starts with 6 and goes down to 0. Right? Same story. But the output is produced on different lines. That's the only difference. Well, I'm pretty sure you know how to do this. Again, I'm using the feature that I just explained. But if you want to go with string manipulations and all, this is what you need to do. Add a new line character every time and print the print string only once by excluding the extra new line character at the end. If you don't want to use string manipulation, again it's the same story. Use for loop, use same range function, and print the value of I. Automatically NL will be moving to the new line, and that's what we want in this case. Excellent. Let's move on to the next print pattern. Input is 5. Well, the output has to start from user given input and stop at 1. And if the input is 6, still you have to start from 5 and end at 1. If the input is 10, start from 9 and go down to 1. What are your observations? Number one, I may not use the user given input as it is, because if the input is even number, I need to start from smallest odd number that is close to it. Second observation, the step is 2 with a decreasing trend. The end value is always 1. Well, all this knowledge is enough for you to know how to write the range function, right? If you are allowed to use string related operations, you can go ahead. See, you are adjusting n value only if it is required. If n value is odd, then don't change the value of n at all. If it is even, then reduce one value from it, so that that even number becomes odd, and that is where you need to start from. And range function, start from n, adjusted n, okay? Go down to 0 exclusive, meaning you will stop at 1, and decrement part is -2. Print the value of ii. Since you are printing only once, keep constructing your print string. Finally, print the value of ps by excluding the extra space at the end. Using these 5 lines of code, you can achieve this. If you are not allowed to use string manipulation operations, then you can use the same range function, but print the value of ii every time by adjusting the value of n to single space. Using these 4 lines of code also, you can achieve this. Well, let's move on to the next print pattern. Input is 5. The only difference between previous program and this program is that each output has to be produced on a new line, and you know how to achieve this already. Well, instead of new space character, you have to use new line character when you are constructing your print string. Or if you are printing it directly, then you should not use any end function, end value. End value defaults to new line character, so that would be helpful to you. But keep it in mind, in this case also you need to adjust the value of n if required. Okay, using these 4 lines of code, you can achieve it. Great work. Let's move on to the next print pattern. Input is 2. Well, it may take some time for you to digest this. Can I say input starts with user given input? Oh, sorry, output starts with user given input. Well, I can say, at least for this sample. But I don't know why I stopped at 20. Let us look at some other example. If the input is 5, yes, of course, output starts with user input, and I stopped at 50, meaning I always print the first 10 multiples of user given input. First 10 always, keep that in mind. That is important. If the input is 10, these are the first 10 multiples of 10. Well, I know the pattern. I know where to start. My starting point is user given input only, but I need to stop after printing 10 multiples of the user given input. Excellent. So again, if you want to build the print string and print it, you can do that. Of course, start with empty print string and start from 1. I'll tell you why it is 1. And here I did not mention the step, because by default step will be assumed to be 1. I start with value 1, and you see what I do. I convert n times ii, meaning 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. These are the ones that will be generated as numerics, integers, but I convert that integer into string and I append space to it. That is how the print string will be constructed, and I'm going to print it every time. All right. So using these 5 lines of code, you can produce this. All right. Next thing is to avoid using string operations and directly achieving it. It's the same range function, and what you're going to print is n times ii value would be 1, right? Because the range starts from 1. So for example, if the input is 2, 2 times 1 is what you are printing. 2 times 1 is 2. Well, after that, I becomes 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Well, I becomes 3. 2 times 3 is a 6. Well, I becomes 4. 2 times 4 is 8. This is how you keep on generating the next number to be generated. And this range produces 10 values, 1 to 10, right? 11 is exclusive anyways. So 1 to 10. Every time some number comes, I multiply it by n so that I'll get the multiple of n, right? And that is how I achieve this. Well, using these 3 lines of code also, you can achieve this. Excellent. Let us move on to the next print pattern. Input is 2. Quite simple, no? By now you should be able to do this on your own. Input is 5. This is expected output. Again, first 10 multiples, but produced on different lines. That's the only difference. Excellent. I'm not going to spend any much time on this because you already know how to achieve this. Now, all that you need to do is to be careful while generating your print string by appending the new line character. And if you are not using string manipulation, just print n times ii so that automatically the cursor will move to the next line before it produces the second output or subsequent output in the iteration, right? So this is how you can achieve this. Quite simple. I hope these patterns seem to be simpler and easier as and when you look at more and more examples. That is where I am giving you so many examples so that you will become comfortable. Then only I will jump on to the triangles, diamonds, rectangles, and squares. All right. Well, the next one is, oh, excellent. So this is something that I would be planning to cover in the next live session because there is a lot that you learned today, and keep practicing these up to here. Okay. And the squares, rectangles, triangles, diamonds, all such shapes I will be covering in the next session. Hope the session is helpful and you enjoyed it. Practice each and every piece of code over here. By just looking at the pattern itself, it has to hit to your mind that, okay, this is how I need to write. Unless until you are at that position, you cannot say that you are confident with iterative structures. Right? All right. That's all for today. And take care. See you in the next live session. Till then, take care. Bye bye.